Chapter 9. The whistle still echoed in the hot night, carried ragged along the ash-choked streets, when I felt the chorus rise in my chest. My lungs were split, my ribs a cage of knives, but I called to the system that lingered like a fever in my bones. I summoned the marrow of every name I had spoken and let it gnarl my throat into iron. Step 4, I roared, and it shook the cracked windows and rattled the banners hanging limp in the smoke. Sacrifice the strong. The answer came back, 100 throats screaming as one. The sound of chains long broken, the sound of the pit risen. We had known this day would come. Long ago, under the pit's dripping pipes, we drew lots in the dark. There had been no weeping when the straws were drawn, only nods and hollow laughs. They knew their duty. Even I had been barred from that lottery, though I had sworn to them I would walk into the teeth of death beside them. They forbade it, and I was their prophet, their iron pipe in the darkness. I would be the voice that gave shape to their dying. 2 lines of men stepped forward, bare but for strips of cloth, shoulders brushing, eyes glassy with hunger and exaltation. Nearly 20 stood in that thin rank, with nothing in their hands but the knowledge of what they were about to buy us. Behind them flanked the rest, clutching the spoils of our uprising, stolen rifles with taped stocks, spears of pipe and sharpened rebar, axes made from stone and bolt. The strong would shield us with their flesh. I gave them no blessing, only the nod. And they charged. Their bare feet slapped the stone, their voices cracked like fire. The defenders of the last show on earth opened fire in a jagged, uneven line, and the first wave came apart in bursts of crimson. Bullets split ribs, tore arms from sockets, heads popped like melons on impact. They were just men, unaltered, unintegrated, human flesh against iron and powder. Limbs misted the air. Bodies fell in grotesque sprawls. But the line did not falter. The second wave was already moving, and they did not blink. They had been waiting, months, years, hoping they might survive long enough to take their place here, to become stones upon the ashen path. And now, their moment had come. They screamed as they ran, and their feet found purchase in the blood of their kin. They slammed forward, some so close their hands brushed the barrels of the guns. The enemy reloaded in haste, their lines shuddering. And then the hail came. The stolen guns opened up with a sound like the earth tearing apart. Bullets shrieked across the block, slamming into the unready defenders. Spears and javelins arced overhead, biting into flesh. The line of crows crumpled, their cries torn away in the storm of vengeance. I saw Vict in the first wave. He had gone down early, his chest torn open, ribs wide against the night. But his mouth was open still, frozen in the shape of a smile. Even dead, he was laughing with us. The system hissed across my sight. His voice would not fade. His name joined the others, carved into the marrow of me, waiting to be called. And still my pipe hung heavy in my grip, slick with blood and rain, my breath rattling in my chest. I lifted it and bellowed again, words rolling for me like thunder made flesh. Canter. The pit gave us hunger, the sun gave us scars. Chorus. The stones are laid down, the path is ours. And the charge went on, the air thick with smoke and the stink of powder. The street ran red beneath us, thick with the runoff of men who had thought themselves guards, defenders, masters. They were only flesh like ours. The difference was we had learned in the pit to love death's mouth, to hold it open and climb inside. Alley to street to alley, the city bent before us like clay too long in the fire, brittle and ready to shatter. My pipe was slick with clots, heavy now not from iron but from the weight of every skull it had caved. My hands did not tremble. They had not trembled in years. The first defenders we met broke like thin glass. Their barricades were sloppily hammered doors, their spears stripped from rafters, their courage borrowed from the walls around them. They did not understand yet that walls meant nothing to men who had lived chained in a pit, men who had learned to smash themselves against steel until it gave. They fired once, twice, their guns wild, their shots biting into plaster and stone, and then they saw the tide. They saw us, 110-odd strong, half-naked and streaked with ash and gore, howling names into the night. And they ran. Some of them dropped their weapons in the street, still smoking, still loaded. We scooped them up as we passed. Some tripped and we fell on them like starving dogs, not a moment wasted, teeth and pipes and blades tearing them open as they wailed. We pressed on. Always forward. The chorus lifted behind me, every throat raw, but they sang all the same. Canter. The walls are of ash, the streets are of bone. Chorus. The pit was our cradle, the world is our home. The echoes filled every shattered glass pane, every sewer grate, until the crows cawed. Their shots grew erratic. They fired high, into smoke. Some clutched their ears like the sound itself was a lash upon their skulls. They tried to form another line at the end of the boulevard, near a crooked square where banners of the gamekeeper still hung in tatters. We cut them down before the banners could finish their swaying. I remember a woman, black hair to her shoulders, trying to rally her fellows with a whistle made from bone. She had courage, I'll grant her that. She lifted it to her lips and the shriek cut sharp over the street. But 3 men of ours, farmers once, half-starved, still with shackles about their ankles, hit her at once, knives in her belly and throat, dragging her down screaming into the dirt. The whistle stayed caught in her teeth until one of them stomped it into splinters. We moved from there into narrower veins of the city. Alleyways close enough that you could smell the rot in the broken brickwork, that you could see the old bones piled behind collapsed fences where the crows had thrown their dead. The stink was bottomless, rising into my mouth until I wanted to gag, but I pressed on, shoving my men forward. There was no turning now. The last of the defenders began to break in earnest. I watched them scatter, some tossing aside their guns to run faster, some fumbling for keys to doorways that no longer opened. They cried for mothers and fathers who had been dead years, cried for water, cried for mercy. We gave them none. A man tried to kneel before me, his palms open, his face wet with tears. My pipe smashed his jaw off his face and the cry was swallowed before it could rise. We were not meant tonight, we were a storm, and storms do not bargain. Then the sound came. It rolled from the deep places like a beast waking, like the earth itself had engines in its belly. At first a tremor in the stone, then the heavy mechanical cough of exhaust. I felt the street vibrate beneath my bare feet and smelled oil cutting through blood and powder. The tunnels below were opening their throats. Engines, many of them, revving and roaring, their echoes slamming against the walls until my teeth rattled. The others faltered, just a moment, their faces turning toward the sound. Some of the crows who still lived let out mad cheers, believing reinforcements had come. They were fools. They did not know yet that it would not save them. Those engines were fleeing. Forward, I spat, my voice carrying like thunder, amplified by the marrow of every name I had taken. The system hissed, granting me strength where my body had none. And so we pressed toward the square where the last defenders had clustered. I could see them already, setting up what little they had left, guns on broken tables, spears thrust through sandbags filled with gravel. Faces hollow, eyes darting. Their courage was not their own but forced by necessity, forced by the gamekeeper's shadow still looming behind them. The gamekeeper hid in his office mansion. We hit them like a tidal surge. And the killing began again, righteous and savage, our shots louder than their shots, the pipes and shivs and stolen rifles speaking louder than their fear. I swung my pipe until my arms felt carved from stone, and when one fell another rose, and still we pushed until there was no line left, only broken bodies and spilled entrails, only ash and the ruin of banners burning. But even then the engines still roared below, climbing, until I knew we stood on the edge of victory. We passed beneath the banners at last. Filthy rags clotted with the gamekeeper's sigils, his advertisements, promises scrawled in dye and old spray across the canvas. Faces painted with wide grins, the words "the last show that the end of the world" peeling and streaked with blood. We tore them down as we went, our hands clawing and ripping until the cloths fell in heaps behind us. Every banner was another throat cut. Every painted smile a skull split open. The metro offices had grown like a tumor out of the ground. Masonry half buried by slag and concrete poured too fast in a world that no longer cared about balance or beauty. The walls lean, the windows gaped like missing teeth, the whole thing stained in smoke and dust. And yet it was the palace of this place, the mansion of the carrion master, the rotting sanctum of the man who had built his kingdom out of our blood. We surged through the wide stairwell, the marble cracked and powdered under our bare feet. Gunfire had slowed to scattered bursts now, stray defenders broken and screaming in the corridors. We cut them down quick and silent. They were only remnants. The real enemy waited at the top. The double doors to his chamber were thrown wide. And there he stood. The gamekeeper. He was not the giant the banners had painted. Not the angel of slaughter he had made himself out to be. He was a man, bald skull spotted with radiation sores, flesh sagging from too much meat and too little sun. His robe was stitched from silks that had long lost their sheen, patched and repatched with canvas and leather. The eyes bulged, bloodshot and bright with the mania of a man who had stared at his own reflection too long. And in his hand, gleaming with an aura of some old and terrible past, was the pistol. Not a cobbled blunderbuss or a rusted pipe gun like the guards. A true relic. A weapon made before the sky burned. Its lines were clean, oiled, preserved. Its cylinder gleamed like a jewel in the torchlight. A god in steel. He waved it through the air like a conductor's wand, his teeth flashing yellow and cracked as he began to scream to us, to the dead, to the walls themselves. "You think you've ended it, don't you?" His voice shook with glee, spit flying. "You think you've silenced the stage, but no, this is the grand finale. This is the best end, the only end, the end the world was born for. The crowd has seen the pits run dry, has seen the dogs and the lizards and the last of every crawling thing die for your myth. The child champion, the prophet of the slave, the ash blood who cannot burn. They'll speak of this for the ages that remain. The last, the truest, the cruelest show ever made." He spun with arms wide, pistol gleaming, his robe flaring like some cracked parody of a priest's vestment. The barrel swept across us, across the room, but he did not fire. His eyes locked to mine, and the fever in them was unbearable. "Do you understand? I've given you everything. 7 years. 7 years of spectacle, of suffering turned to song. I have made you eternal. And this," he raised the pistol to his own temple, grinning with bloody gums. "This is the curtain call." And he bowed deeply. There was no hesitation. No pause for breath. The trigger clicked once, and the sound cracked louder than any cheer that had ever risen in the pit. The side of his skull opened like wet clay, gray matter spraying across the wall in a sudden, obscene mural. The pistol dropped from his hand, spinning on the floor, clattering against stone. The gameskeeper crumpled where he stood, robes collapsing into themselves, eyes already glassing, his smile still hooked on his lips as though even in death he thought he had won. For a long moment, none of us spoke. The chamber was silent save for the drip of his blood down the wall and the ragged breathing of the freed men and women around me. The man who had owned us, the crow of crows, the architect of the last show, lay dead by his own hand. The system cut in / quest completed, survive the show / reward threshold not met reward deferred. And still, somehow, I felt no relief. Only a coldness, as though the pit itself still lingered in me, whispering that the show was not yet over. We fell on them all. Every crow. Every wretch and hanger-on who had feasted on our misery. We did not stop when the screaming turned to pleading, nor when the pleading turned to silence. The alleys ran red and the courtyards piled with broken shapes. There was no mercy left in us. We had been bred for spectacle, honed to hate, and the gameskeeper's death was not enough. His city was his body and we tore it apart organ by organ. I let them take their time. There was no need to rush. Men who had stood beside me in the pits, who had stitched my flesh with scraps of cloth and spat water into my mouth to keep me alive, now bent their hands to crueler works. They took knives to their tormentors, stones to their skulls, and they laughed while they did it. Years of degradation and humiliation demanded more than quick deaths. They stretched out the killing until the night bled into another day, and still the city's cries did not cease. The crows died choking on their own teeth. When at last the noise dwindled, when the last ember of resistance had guttered out in some forgotten corridor, we gathered in the square before the metro offices. Smoke curled from the windows where fires had caught, staining the gray skies darker still. The smell of iron and char clogged every breath. And we counted. One by one, the survivors emerged from the alleys, the basements, the gutted homes. Bloodied, limping, dragging weapons no better than rusted pipes and splintered spears. Hollow-eyed and trembling from spent rage. 53. That was all. Out of 187 who had risen with me, who had surged like a tide out of the cages and tunnels, only 53 now stood. The price had been horrible. Worse than we could have imagined when we first pressed shoulder to shoulder against the bolted doors of the pit. But it had been paid, and nothing remained of our chains. We were free. The word did not come easy. It felt too light, too fragile, for the weight of what had been bought in blood. And yet there it was, a truth that no guard, no crow, no gameskeeper could deny now. The city was ours. I stood at the steps of the mansion with my pipe in hand, its metal slick and blackened. Behind me the gameskeeper's body still lay where he had fallen, a smear of him dried on the wall. His pistol sat in my belt, the ancient relic now nothing more than another tool. He had thought himself eternal. But he was gone, and we remained. The fighters turned their eyes to me. Even in freedom, they searched for a voice to bind them. They had lived too long with nothing but command and cruelty to know what else to do. And I, who had been child and prophet, monster and myth, felt their weight upon me. We did not cheer. There was no strength left for joy. Instead we began to plan. The city stretched broken around us, but it still stood. The arena walls still rose, though their stands were smeared with ash and blood. The tunnels still ran beneath, and the old train lines curled like veins into the dark. Supplies lay hidden in storerooms. Weapons waited to be claimed. The crows had grown fat on our suffering, and now their fat would keep us alive. We parceled the tasks. Some to gather what food could be found, others to drag the corpses into heaps outside the walls. The air had to be cleared of the stink of death if we were to sleep without choking. Still others scouted the outskirts, fearful that another flock of carrion men might descend upon us if word spread too soon. And always, our thoughts turned toward the same truth: the gameskeeper was gone, but the world beyond Chandurax still waited. The Bureaucratica, the corpus servants, the other cities scattered in ruin across the continents. 53 remained. Scarred, gaunt, hollow-eyed. But 53 was enough. Enough to keep moving, enough to fight again, enough to carve something out of the wreckage. That night we slept in the open square, backs against stone, weapons still in hand. The fires crackled low, and the wind carried the ash of the banners we had burned. No chains clanked. No guards prodded us with spears. The silence was heavy, but it was ours. And when dawn came, we woke not as slaves, nor fighters, nor peat-born carrion. We woke as the inheritors of our tormentors' wealth. The city lay quiet as a corpse when the last of the screaming faded. The banners of the gameskeeper burned limp on the heated piles, tattered streamers that caught on broken steel and burned cloth were all that remained. I carried his pistol at my belt, the metal old and clean, weightier than anything I had yet held. The hole in his head still smoked in my memory, pink mist turned black against the office walls. His final words echoed yet in my skull, that this was the best show the world had ever and would ever see. Perhaps he was right. Perhaps he knew it was time. We did not mourn him. We did not mourn any crow. We preformed the largest ashen spiral in the remains of the city for the fallen. But it felt hollow. The arena had already burned out mourning from our marrow. The pit had been a grave that refused to close, and we had risen from it too ragged to shed tears. What we wanted was food, water, cloth, breath that was not fouled by the screams of crows. So we set to work like hyenas come down upon a lion's kill, and the lion had been fat, and the lion had gorged himself on the dead of the world until we cracked open his ribs and took all that was left. It was not enough to kill them. The crows had to be eaten. Men and women, whole families who had cheered as a child was broken on the sand, as dogs tore at my flesh, as lizards came hissing from the drains to swallow me in their hunger. They had made of death a theater and of pain a coin. And now we made them eat. Caldre stood with me when we slit the first throat. His hands, burnt dark with sun and chain, did not tremble. He said only, "Step 4 was theirs. Step 5 is ours." And he bent to carve the body like it was a carcass on a butcher's block. We found their stores, the salted cuts and black jars of fat rendered from victims who had gone unnamed. They had been eating us already, one long closed loop of man devouring man. What difference then that we tore the lid away and swallowed it down ourselves? The taste was iron and salt and rot and we gagged, some of us, but hunger is the most loyal knife a man can hold to his own throat. So we chewed and swallowed and wiped the grease across our lips, and in that first night, I saw the others grow quiet. From 187 we were 53. 53 in the empty city, wandering its broken plazas, its half-lit burning alleys. I walked the streets and every door swung open to me, for there were none left to bar them. The crows were all meat, or ash, or bone now. Their shrines to death lay toppled, their gambling dens overturned, their market stalls rich with bones carved into dice, with feathers dipped in blood. I let the others strip what they wished. Cloth for bandages, boots for feet long bled raw, glass bottles still half full of oil. In one chamber we found the tapes the gameskeeper had hoarded, relics of the world before the sky burn, reels of laughter and light. A few of the men wanted to smash them. But I said no. We would carry them with us, and burn them later, when the time came to leave nothing of this place behind. That was the plan from the beginning. No one would live here. No one would sit where the crows had sat and watch another boy bleed. To remain was to rot into their likeness. So we set ourselves to the work of dismantling. We tore down beams for carts, pried loose the wheels from wagons rusting in the yards, stripped wiring from the walls, took batteries and plates and knives. We were no longer slaves but carrion feeders, and the city was the body that gave us our strength. At night we gathered by the arena's broken mouth. It gaped black, no torches, no banners, the sand within fouled and clotted. None of us wished to step there again. So we sat just beyond its shadow and spoke of what had been lost. Men like Oran, who had taken a spear through the belly and smiled while he bled. Women like Kelly's, who had taught us to sharpen bone into knives and who had fallen in the second wave. Their names we spoke, and I let my bone co-carry them, each syllable drawn back into the air in their own voices. It chilled us, but it comforted us too, like the dead still sat in our circle, nodding at the fire. They asked me then, what comes after? And I told them what I had learned, What I had seen in the eyes of the gameskeeper and the crows alike. That if Chandurax could give birth to such men, then there would always be more. Somewhere beyond the ash and heat, somewhere in the poison night, there would be other gameskeepers, other crows, other pits carved to house the last survivors. If we did nothing, they would rise again, and another child would be dragged down into the blood. So I said it plain. We would go out. We would scour them. We would make sure no pit ever opened again. They looked at me long, their eyes burned hollow and bright. Jason's laughter rose in my skull like smoke. World domination, he whispered. That's what you've set your hand to. And perhaps it was. Perhaps it had to be. The first days of occupation were not days of rest. We stripped the city of its meat, of its glass, of its metals. We drank what water we could find, bitter and thick with rust. We burned what could not be carried. The smoke rose out of the hole and into the sky and drifted out across the dead lands, a signal fire to anyone left alive that the crows had fallen. We cut apart the banners and used the cloth to wrap our feet. We cracked open the gameskeeper's vaults and took the drugs and liquors and pills he had saved for his shows, doling them out to dull pain, to kill infection, to sedate the dying. One man named Kara sat with me in the nights. He had been a jeweler once, before all this. He told me how metal bends when it's heated, how even the hardest gem can be carved into a curve if struck long enough. That's us, he said. That's what we were in those pits. And now we've bent enough. Time to snap. His laughter was hollow, but his hands were steady when he laid them on the pipe I carried. He etched a mark into its length, a spiral of ash. My weapon bore the pit's memory then, as surely as I did. The survivors thinned further even in the days after. A fever took one. A wound festered in another. Some simply lay down and never rose again. The fight burned out of their marrow. We burned them and did not eat them. By the seventh day we were ready. We had carts drawn by hand, supplies bound up, weapons scavenged and cleaned. 53 had become fewer again, but enough. Enough to march. Enough to turn vengeance into movement. I looked back at the corpse of the city, its towers black with smoke, its alleys littered with bones, and I knew none would ever come here again. We had stripped it to the ribs, and the ribs we had broken. I raised the pistol then, the gameskeeper's last toy. I fired it once into the air. The sound cracked like thunder, the ceiling above the station ruins burst out into the sky in a small hole. 6 shots left. That was our signal. We left barely 50 strong with eyes set on the horizon. The vow burned in my chest. We would find them all. The metro ended not with escape but with stone. I knew it well. The tunnels narrowed into veins and then collapsed entirely into blank walls of slagged rock, melted in the long-ago sky burn, no way through but back. Even now, the dead smell of those cloning lab passages clung to my nostrils, that airless death with no place to go. So when the survivors asked if we could descend, if there was safety beneath, I told them the truth. There was none. The tunnels were tombs, and I would not bury us in them. There was only one way left, up. The crows had worn jackets of human skin stitched into crude armor, each patched and in salt and oil, their grotesque vanity turned into survival. The fabric of man proved a better shield than any rag. My men tore them from the racks and corpses alike, pulled them tight across their backs. It stank, it bled when we moved, it peeled from the seams and cracked with every step. But the sun that lay beyond the broken vault of Chandurax's sky would flay a man raw in hours without it. I pulled a jacket across my own shoulders, it seems hard and rough against my skin. I thought of the nameless bodies that had made it, of the crows who had worn it like royalty, and then I spat. Let it shield me. Let me walk in their death and turn it back on them. Every stitch was a confession. This was decided by the group to hide the prophet as I needed no protection. We gathered at the edge of the metro gates, 49 became a ragged company. We did not speak of survival. Survival was not a word here. What waited beyond was not life but a sentence. We stepped up into the wastes because there was nowhere else to go. Death was assured, but so was vengeance, and in that equation, it became easy. The wastes opened like an oven door. Heat poured over us, dry and thick, riddled with static. The sky was a dome of green fire, irradiated clouds that never broke, hanging in tiers like melted glass. The ground was ash, soft and gray, streaked with the black bones of melted towers. The smell was chemical rot and old meat. To breathe was to taste blood. We walked. I carried my pipe, the spiral etched by Carabride against its length. Verbrandt walked at my left, his old fighter's stride steady, his eyes narrowed against the glare. Duragan came at my right, lips moving in constant chant, muttering the names of the dead until his voice went raw and the words cracked like stone. Behind us trailed the others, Some limping, some already coughing, some with the skin peeling under the jackets as the radiation found its way through the seams. We had no fear. The fear had burned out of us years before. It was not life we sought, not breath or food or children to carry our names. Those things belonged to another world, one gone to fire before my first memory. All we had left was the need, the endless compulsion to kill what had made us, to stop the theater of death Chandurax had stitched into its veins. We had become vengeance made flesh. If we died, we died. But before the dying, we would put an end to them. The first day took 3. A man named Darren fell by noon, coughing blood until his lungs came up raw in his hands. He staggered forward anyway, arms stretched out like a supplicant, and when he dropped, the others did not stop. We cut the jacket from his body before it cooled and passed it to a younger fighter whose own had begun to flake away in patches. The boy wept as he took it, and I told him there was no weeping here, only walking. That night we burned a fire and fed ashes into Darren's spiral. We learned to move at night. The second day the sun blistered our faces. The jackets cracked like old bark, splitting to reveal the raw flesh beneath. We smeared blood and fat from the crows across the seams to keep them pliable. That night as we walked the ground was littered with slagged bones, sometimes human, sometimes not. Predators still stalked the wastes, creatures twisted by radiation into shadows of their kind. On the third day, a storm came. It was not rain but ash, a hurricane of black grit that scoured the flesh raw and drove the breath from our throats. We huddled together in the lee of a collapsed tower, 50 barely shrinking into just over 40 by dawn. A woman named Kalmar did not wake, her skin fused to her jacket, her mouth open and full of ash. Another, Trell, walked into the storm and was gone. We did not follow. The storm was unforgiving. And yet that night we marched pulling the sleds all the while. The system hummed at the edge of my mind, its notifications sparse, cruel. A few gains from kills taken in the city, small increments that added nothing. The exponential curve mocked me. Level 8 and no further. The princes of Bureaucratica, I know, rise to their teen levels before their 10th year, growing fat on tailored hunts across controlled wilds. But here, in Chandurax, each level was a mountain, and each mountain was guarded by corpses. I bore the weight of it without flinching. Numbers were just another name. Strength was in the step, in the hand, in the voice. Step 5 now carried us forward, unnamed but understood, endurance. The spiral wound on, stone by stone. On the 5th day we met others. Surviving travelers. Not crows, not guards, but ragged figures huddled in a crater, their eyes glazed, their teeth broken. They had not seen the gamekeeper's city. They had not watched the pit. They were dying all the same, their bodies brittle, their bellies swollen. They begged us for water, for food. My men looked to me. I said nothing, only raised the pipe. The decision was not a decision. We killed them quick, cut the jackets from their bones, carved the meat from their legs. None gagged when it came time to eat. Others chewed in silence. None refused. There was no life here. There was only the path. The 7th day came and with it the first fight worth the name. A pack of beasts, skinless rats with teeth like shards of glass, rushed us from the shadows of a burned-out mall. They came snarling, 10 or more, their paws tearing trenches in the ash. I stepped forward, pipe raised, the spiral gleaming. My men formed a half-circle at my back, spears leveled, shivs flashing. The rats leapt and we met them in blood. I swung until my arms shook, until their skulls split and their jaws cracked. Verbrandt drove a spear through one's chest, the point snapping off in its ribs. Duragan threw himself into the dirt, stabbing upward with a shard of metal into a rat's side. We killed them all. After, we ate. The meat was bitter, thick with poison, but it kept us walking. I could see the radiation biting deeper, but it bit us all save me, and that made them equal. The rats' hides we skinned and laid across our shoulders, doubling the layers of shielding. By the 10th day we were 39. Jackets cracked and fell away, skins shed like snakes, and we replaced them with fresher hides. Some grew tumors that bulged beneath the cloth, their eyes bleeding red. They walked anyway. When one fell, another lifted his jacket. When one died, another cut his flesh for the fire. We had become a single thing, a war band bound by ash and bone. During the day we sat in circles, our voices low. I spoke the names of the dead with my bone co, each syllable rising like a ghost into the sky. The men and women listened, heads bowed. In those moments we were not 53, nor 39, nor any number at all. We were one, the last voice of Chandurax, the end of its spiral. There was no fear. There was no life. Only the need. And the need burned hotter than the sun. 15 days. 36 of us. Strong was the wrong word. We were less than strong, more than dead. We were the remainder, a tally of stubbornness with feet that refused to stop. My pipe was black with old blood, the spiral caked so deep in rust and char that it looked carved from bone itself. Verbrand limped, the shank of a tumor blossoming in his thigh, but his eyes still burned. Duragan had lost his voice 2 nights ago, chanting himself hoarse, yet he mouthed names without sound. The others were meat-stitched together by rage. It was Duragan who saw the ash cloud first. A finger stabbing out, lips mouthing there. I raised my eyes, and across the wastes a column of grey turned and twisted, a tower that climbed to the poisoned sky. It could only mean one thing: men in number, marching, dragging. A caravan. Slavers. My system flickered. New event, caravan sighted, distance, 4 leagues, quest branch, intercept or ignore. I spat into the dust. We had no choice. Blood draws blood. If men move slaves through this dead world, then they were our enemy by definition. I told my warband, wherever they go, it is our next mark. So we followed. 3 days, hard and lean. The slavers moved slow with their cargo, chains rattling across the wastes, but they had beasts too, great ox things swollen with tumors, their hides sloughing in sheets, yoked to crude iron carts. The victims inside were silent, bound, their heads lolling. We saw them only at night, silhouettes against the glow of the rad fires the slavers lit to keep predators off if there were any left. To keep pace we walked through the day's sun. It cost us 2 more. One fell and did not rise, bones refusing to carry. Another wandered from the line and into the heat shimmer and ashen fog. We heard him scream once and then nothing. By the 3rd day we were 34. That morning the slavers broke. We saw their campfire glow through the haze. A rough circle of wagons, guards with guns pacing. We smelled the meat they roasted, the laughter rising in cracks. I felt the old click in my head, the system whispering. Quest updated, free the slaves, kill the slavers, reward, experience, equipment, reputation. I gathered my men. Pipe raised, jacket split and bleeding, I called out. Who here is already dead? The words came with no hesitation, we who were marked for death sing as one. My voice echoed, empowered by the system, rattling across their skulls like iron bells. 34 voices answered. We went. The first volley cracked across the wastes, muzzle flash sparking bright. They had rifles, crude automatics patched from pre-burn wreckage. Bullets snapped air, bit stone. One of ours fell in the first rush, his skull opened. The rest did not falter. We spread wide. 2 lines, broken by ash ridges, moving in leaps. The stolen guns we carried barked in return, shrapnel rounds cutting through the haze. I shouted targets, voice burning raw, keeping them pinned, forcing their heads down. Verbrand, half limping, braced behind a wagon and emptied a clip into the slavers crouched at their fire. 2 went down screaming, their blood painting the wheels. Then melee. There is always melee. I surged in with the pipe, spiral raised high. The first slaver I met wore a rust iron mask, his chest painted in ash. He raised a machete, swung down. I caught it on the pipe, sparks flying, shoved forward with the weight of hunger. The pipe caved his chest with a crunch, and he folded like wet cloth. Behind me an orchestra began. Not words now, but howls. My men rushed the circle, shivs flashing, spears driving. They tore through the slavers like dogs, dragging them down, stabbing again and again. Guns barked close, so close the muzzle flash burned hair. A round took a man beside me in the jaw, half his head gone. The others screamed. The wagons rocked, slaves inside beating at the walls, their voices rising in panic and hope both. I shouted to Duragan, silent Duragan who mouthed his prayers. He grabbed 3 others and moved, cutting through the chains with jagged blades, hauling the doors wide. The prisoners spilled out, blinking, half blind, some falling to the dust. We pulled them upright, shoved weapons into their hands, told them they could live if they killed. The slavers broke into 2 knots, one still firing from cover, the other rushing with blades. My men met them headlong. I saw Kelrick take a round to the gut, fold but rise again, spear lancing forward to catch a man through the throat. I saw Verbrandt's tumor-ridden body drop one slaver with a tackle, his fists pulping the face beneath until it was only red paste. System messages flickered, fast, unreadable. Slaver humanid killed plus 25 EXP, slaver humanid killed plus 25 EXP. I swung until my arms shook, until bone crunched under iron. I drank their blood. The ash drank their screams. At last the firing slackened. The last of them turned to flee, sprinting into the wastes. I pointed and my men surged, catching them, dragging them down. One left alive for questioning. But no slaver would walk away from this ground. Silence after. The slaves huddled together, chains clattering loose. Some wept, some stared blank. We counted heads. 23 freed, 31 of us left alive. A ruinous victory, and yet a victory. I raised my pipe, blood dripping. My voice carried over them all. The slavers are no more. We had broken them here, on ash, with fire and bone. The freed were their own now. They could walk with us or they would die in the wastes. There was no other path. And so we stood under the dead sky, our breaths ragged, our limbs shaking, the wagons burning behind us. I felt the weight of the system pressing in. I felt Jason's old laugh in my skull. World domination, he'd said. A painful reminder of how far we had yet to go. Chapter 10. The ground steamed with blood, black against gray ash, the smell of iron and piss thick as rot. I stood among the ruin, pipe still dripping. The fight was over, but the silence afterward was its own kind of noise, a weight pressing on the chest. My men were panting, some bent double, others slumping against the broken wagons. In the smoke the freed slaves huddled, eyes hollow, wrists raw from chain. They looked at us as if at monsters or saints. Only one slaver still drew breath. He had gone down screaming when a spear took his thigh. My men dragged him to me, their faces hot with the glow of violence, some with tears cutting streaks through the ash. He begged, the old prayers of men who thought mercy still walked the earth. I looked at him a long time, my pipe hanging heavy in my grip, and then I said nothing at all. The others understood. They tore his clothes, bound him in chains, and propped him against the cart. His life would not be ended swift. He would be given back, inch by inch, to the same despair he had sown. My system flickered, cold in my head. Slaver captured, optional event triggered, warning, prolonged torture may affect mercy threshold. We did not bury our dead. We had no earth for such charity. Instead we laid them on the ash, marked their names with spirals poured from blackened sand. Duregan, though his throat was torn raw, mouthed the rites as he circled, and I spoke for him when his voice broke. 31 of us. That was the number left when we had finished counting. 31 hardened, 31 ragged, 31 doomed but breathing. And with us, 23 freed souls, staring wide at the sky, a freedom they had not thought to see again. Some would walk with us. Some would fall. None would be spared choice. We looted the wagons. Rusted guns, pitted blades, sacks of mold made to bread, casks of water turned half sour. The ox things that pulled them were butchered where they stood, their tumors cut away and their flesh boiled down. Hunger was the only law. My men tore strips of meat and chewed them raw as we marched. The wounded were bound in cloth. Some would not last. Kelrick was already gone, the hole in his gut too deep. Verbrandt walked though his tumor bled, though he staggered like a drunk, and none dared tell him to stop. That early that night we feasted by firelight. The freed slaves were given food, the first bite in days for most. They chewed slow, as if afraid it would vanish. The captured slaver whimpered, half conscious, as the others heated iron in the coals. I did not watch long. His screams joined the wind. The system whispered again. Quest updated, caravan destroyed, reputation gained, liberators, fear, reverence reward threshold not met. Rewards deferred. I stood before them all, 31 and 23, 54 souls bound by ash and blood. My voice rang out, system backed, rolling across them like thunder. We march, I told them. We march on the bastion. The city that this slaver dog says dares to call itself civilization while it sells men and women like beasts. We march on it because it stands, and because it should not. The freed slaves stared. Some nodded, some shook. But the warband answered. Their roar rose from broken throats, from scarred lungs, from ribs rattling like drums. The horizon burned faintly to the west, a smear of light against poison sky. Whatever the bastion was, lay there. The seat of the crows. We turned our faces toward it. No hope for life. No fear of death. Only the path of ash and the weight of names. And so we marched, 53 souls and one dying slaver, into the waste. The wastes did not take us the way we thought they would. They gnawed us, yes, but did not bite through. We had worn the stitched jackets of crow skin, grotesque armor sewn from the ones we had butchered in their city, and the burns of the sky fell on us softer than on others. The radiation hissed against the seams, cracked them in time, peeled them from our shoulders like bark from trees, but we held on. And when they failed, we replaced them with new hides, new jackets, more ash. A cycle of horror made into a kind of survival. We walked into the ash sea. 15 days passed. The nights were long and cold, the sky crawling with red stars, the ground cracking beneath our bare and blood-crusted feet. The wind stank of old fires. Sometimes we heard voices in the ash, like whispers of those who had walked before us. Sometimes the sand moved like a tide though there was no water, only bone and grit shifting under the weight of the poisoned air. We did not die as much as we thought we would. A few fell, yes. One girl among the freed slaves walked too far from the line and breathed deep the fog that crawled low in the gullies. She choked black and was gone before anyone could drag her out. Another man grew tumors in his eyes, and when he began to scream that he could see the sun burning inside him, he clawed them out and bled until he was still. These were deaths the wastes demanded, taxes paid to the land itself. But the rest endured. Our skin grew thicker, our lungs harsher. Hunger bit us but did not cripple us. The freed slaves began to shift. At first they looked at us in horror, whispering among themselves that they had been freed into something worse than the pits. But hunger has a way of killing conscience. They ate what we ate, the stringy meat of the crows we found in the wastes, sometimes each other when the bodies fell. They learned our songs and the spirals we carved in ash to send off the dead. Slowly, haltingly, they began to answer when I called out the old words. Canter. Chains learned our wrists, rings learned our throats. Chorus. We tune them to thunder, hear us now. Survivor morale, stable skill acquired, command voice level 1. On the 12th day we saw the column of smoke. It rose not like the thin spires of burned wood but thick, broad, stretching into the heavens like a pillar. It did not fade. It was constant. It was life, and life meant people. We walked toward it 3 days more. At night the glow of it turned the horizon red. The last morning we came over a ridge of ash and saw it at last, the hive. It was not like the old cities from Jason's memory, those tall glass things that reached for the sky. No, this one grew downward, like a fang buried in the earth. Its crown jutted only a few stories above the waist, black towers scarred by the burn, banners hanging limp in the irradiated wind. But below those crowns were mouths, great openings into the ground where machines roared and lights flickered. And there was movement. Caravans crawling in and out, slave chains led by men in blackened armor, guards perched on makeshift towers. It breathed like a beast, inhaling men and exhaling ash. We watched from the ridge in silence, the 51 of us that remained. And as we watched, a figure broke from the straggle of the slave caravans below. Thin, stumbling, eyes rolling wild. A man, or what was left of one. His skin cracked and scarred, his back whipped raw. He ran into the wastes until 2 riders chased him down, beat him into the dirt, and dragged him back. He did not fight. He only stared upward, toward us, as if he saw us on that ridge. And I knew him then, though I had never laid eyes on him before. I knew him as one of ours, a slave who served dark masters in action only. That night, when the caravan camped outside the city walls, we went down. Silent as we could be, knives in hand, scars hidden under crow skin. We killed the guards, took their food, and dragged the runaway from the chains. He was near death, his breath ragged, but when I pressed the rim of my pipe to his chest and called his name from him, he coughed it like blood. Dravage. He said it again, louder, as if reminding himself. The men pressed water to his lips. I crouched beside him. His eyes were cracked yellow from the burn, but they still burned bright. They call it the consortium block, he said, voice raw as stone on stone. But it's no refuge. It's a pit turned inside out. The richer you are, the deeper you live. The earth shields them from the sky's fire. The poor live near the top, close to the burn. The bottom floors are clean, bright. Real food enough for anyone I hear. Machines that still work. The ruling caste, they call themselves the corporation. Men who deal in flesh. Men who trade death like coin. They call it civilization but it's just an excuse to abuse people. My pipe was heavy in my hand. The fire cast shadows across the freed faces. Some wept, some spat, some sat with heads bowed. The word civilization clung to us like bile. The system answered. Quest update, Bastion revealed, new directive, destroy the corporation. I said nothing. My men shifted, waiting. The night air hissed like a dying fire. The consortium rose out of the ground before us, bloated and alive. The corporation ruled it like gods. And we, the 51 who remained, had come to kill gods. The ash winds came down from the ridges that night and crawled through our camp, low and bitter, carrying with it the stink of the hive of humanity below. Bastion. Consortium. The names meant little. To me it was only another pit. A wider one. The same bones gnawed, The same chains clamped, only deeper and more hidden. They had buried their cruelty in the earth, not burned it into the open sky. We sat in a half-circle around the perimeter, what fire we dared, hidden behind a mound of slag rock. 52 of us when you counted Dravage, though he still lay wrapped in a blanket of stitched skin, coughing through the night. Every face lit by the moon looked carved from ash. I could not tell the freed slaves from my old fighters now. Hunger and the wastes were carving them alike. Duragin, whose voice had returned broken and static like a particle not quite tuned to the right frequency, spoke first. His voice was always loud, too sure, though his bones showed through his chest like stakes under a tarp. He had become priest and comrade both months ago now, and when he spoke they listened. We have seen what waits there. Guards, gates, the eyes of men everywhere. If we rush it we die at the walls. If we stay in the wastes we die to the sky. There is only one road left to us. We must go in. Not as ourselves. Not as what we are. As them. He spat into the dirt. His spit hissed like acid. They have given us the wagons. We use them. We play the crows. We walk through their teeth and bite from within. A murmur rolled through the men and women. Some nodded. Some stared hard into the ground. Verbrandt, his shoulders bent from years of hard work before the pits had bent him worse, shook his tumor-ridden head slow. His voice came out dry as straw. These crows lived among one another for years. They know each other's stink. They know each other's coughs. You think we should wear their coats and pass for them? One word, one look too long, and they will cut us to ribbons before we cross the gates. And worse, they will laugh as they do it. Better to die in the attempt than to rot out here, spat Reagan. Better to fall in the teeth of the consortium than to wait for the sky to cook us. Verbrandt's jaw clenched. He drew an ash between his teeth and let it grind there. I say we wait longer. We watch the gates. We learn their rhythms. Men go in, men go out. Somewhere in there lies a weakness. The bastion has cracks. We find the cracks and force them wider. But this play-acting, this masquerade, will be the death of us all. It was then one of the freed slaves spoke. A woman named Lyra, thin as wire, her skin marked with lash scars so deep they gleamed pale against the burn. She had been quiet since the caravan, speaking only in whispers to those she knew. But now she rose to her knees, and the firelight cut her face in two. This caravan was from the deep south of Chandurax. They are strangers here, she said, her voice raw but steady. We know the stink of our masters. We know it better than they do. We know the way they walked, their cadence, the way they gripped a chain and spit on our backs when the slaves faltered. We know as do because we have been under it every day of our lives since Skyburn. Let us wear their skins. Let us hold the whips. You wear the chains. Bend your backs again. Shuffle your feet. We will carry the whips. They will not question us. The arrogant never do. The murmurs grew louder then. Some laughed bitterly. Some growled. Duragan rose halfway, his shadow looming over her. You ask the unburning prophet to crawl like a dog in chains? You ask us to pretend to be what he was born to kill? Her eyes burned hotter than his. I ask you to live long enough to kill them. Do you think your strength means anything at the gate? Do you think they will tremble at your scars and your pipe? No. They will shoot you where you stand. And you will not rise again. We do not fear death, Duragan growled. The circle grew restless. Men spat, argued, shifted. The freed slaves muttered among themselves, some nodding at Lyra's words, others shaking their heads. The fighters sat stone still, their pride heavy as anchors. Dravage stirred then, groaning as he pulled himself upright, leaning on a staff of broken steel. His breath wheezed like bellows. He looked half dead, and maybe he was, but his voice carried. I have lived in the consortium. I have crawled its floors. Listen to me. There is no sneaking in. There is no climbing the walls. Every inch is watched. The corporation built it to keep out what we are. Survivors. But they are greedy. They hunger for slaves. Always more. They are getting bored on the lower levels, you see. They do not ask many questions. They do not look very close. It is the only way in. The fire crackled. The silence that followed was heavy, stretched thin as wire. I leaned forward, pipe across my knees. I looked from one face to another. Scars, burns, hollow cheeks, eyes that burned like embers refusing to die. You fear dishonor, I said to Duragan. You fear crawling. Is not honor everything to the dead? But we are past death, past honor. We are ash given form. We are not men, not women, not slaves. We are the last breath of this world and we will be its last word. A low murmur rose. Not anger now. Agreement. Verbrandt spat again, but he nodded slow. If we die, We'd die striking at their heart. That is enough. Lyra lowered her eyes, but there was the flicker of something like triumph there. Dravage sagged back to the ground, his work done. I stood then, pipe raised, the fire's glow catching the scars etched across its length. "Listen," I said. "We don't have much of a choice here." The night howled. Some of the freed slaves looked at their feet. The old fighters stared back at me, waiting to be convinced. "We can't storm the walls. We'd be forgotten before we hit the gates. We can't wait out here either. The wastes will finish us long before the bastion does." I tapped the pipe against the ground, slow, steady. "That leaves one way in. We use the wagons. We play the crows. Ugly, yes. Risky, yes. But it's the only door left to us." My voice rose as loud as I would dare. "This time when the chains fall, they will fall forever." I looked around the circle, trying to catch every eye. "Like you said, you wear the whips. We wear the chains. You act like them. We act like what we were. We've done worse to survive. And once we're in, once those gates close behind us, we'll show them exactly what we are. Not slaves. Not carrion. Not their entertainment. Fire. And fire doesn't stay in cages." The silence stretched. Then Lyra nodded grimly once. "I'll carry the whip." Duragan looked away, jaw tight. But he didn't argue again. "Good," I said, softer now. "Then it's settled. We walk through their gates together. And when the time comes, we burn them from the inside out." The night was a red hush under the poison sky. The wagons creaked as we readied them, wheels wrapped in cloth to muffle their scream against the slag rock road. Every man and woman bent themselves into roles. The freed slaves, now made masters, carried whips, wore the stitched coats like crows, their faces hidden behind flesh masks not their own. My old fighters, myself included, took the chains, collars fastened around our throats with ash-stained rope. We stooped our shoulders, let our eyes go hollow. It was harder than the hunger, harder than the marches. To remember how to look broken. The gates loomed ahead, black teeth set into the earth, what was left of the buildings pre-sky burn, speared with torches that spat blue fire. The walls above them were alive with movement, shapes pacing, rifles gleaming, shadows shouting to each other in voices hard and sharp. Beyond them, the glow of the consortium pulsed from the deep, like the mouth of a buried furnace. We drew up short of the checkpoint. My pulse thudded so loud it drowned the creak of the axles. The air stank of oil and blood and something sweeter, rotting fruit maybe, carried from the pits below. "Steady," I whispered, my pipe hidden under rags like a slave's scrap. My voice was low, for the chain gang alone. "Keep your heads down. Don't look at them too long. Don't speak. The more broken you look, the less they'll see." Verbrandt muttered under his breath, his voice cracked like sand on glass. "Feels too close. They'll smell the light." "They won't smell anything but their own rotting breath," I said. "Trust me." The caravan edged forward. A guard's voice sparked down from the rampart. "Who comes at night? Speak or be shot where you stand." Lyra, whip coiled at her side, raised her chin just enough. She shouted back, rough and cruel in the way we had heard every day in captivity, "Caravan out of the south. Losses in the ash but we bring slaves enough to cover them twice over." A silence. Then laughter. Ugly, thick laughter from the wall. "Bring them forward. We'll count your haul. If you're light, you know the rules." The wagons groaned closer. I felt the sweat sting my back under the stitched jacket. My wrists ached where the chains of the past had cut deep, but I dared not shift. My men moved like shadows beside me, each one bent, silent, the part played to the bone. We reached the base of the wall. Guards waited with lamps. Their light washed over us, pale as bone fire. I could feel it crawl across my face, pause, searching. One guard's eyes lingered too long. His lips curled. "This one," he said, stepping close to me. His voice was thick with the joy of cruelty. "This one is young." His eyes lit with a deviant glee. Haven't seen that in a while. The chain yanked against my throat as he jerked me toward him. My chest burned. His eyes were close enough to see the red veins crawling there. Lyra's knuckles whitened on the whip. She looked at me, then at him, then at me again. I whispered with my eyes, "Do it." Her eyes flicked only once, imperceptible if one wasn't looking for it. Her hand rose. The whip cracked. It bit across my back, fire-ripping skin, blood welling warm. I staggered forward, hissed through clenched teeth but did not cry out. The guard laughed, delighted. "He squeals good," he said, shoving me back into line. "Who's he for then?" The others moved again, chains rattling, heads down. My back burned, But the sting was a gift. Lyra replied flawlessly. You know these consortium types' interesting tastes. I'm sure once Hess used you could find him yourself at a discounted rate. The guard smiled and winked at Lyra. Alright, keep it moving, he said. The gates groaned. Massive things hobbled together across the street, conjoining black husks of two buildings. Iron and ash scraping together, opening just wide enough for the wagons to pass. The noise was thunder in my skull. We filed through. Wagons pushed step after step under the torchlight. Breath held, hearts thundering, every moment waiting for the shot that would end us. But none came. Inside, the air changed. It grew colder, damper, tasted of old stone and the rot of men packed too tight. Lights glared against walls of steel and slag, leading downward like a massive parking garage. Voices echoed from below, the calls of merchants, the moans of chained things. We had crossed the teeth. We were inside the belly now. I leaned just enough to whisper to the man chained beside me, Dragon, his face dark with ash, his lips chanted bloody. Breathe, I told him. We made it. He did not look at me. He stared down the passage that descended into the hive of men, his eyes like burned coals. Not yet, he murmured. Not until it burns. And the wagons rolled on,